I used to think the scariest sound inside a diner after midnight was the old coffee machine coughing itself awake behind the counter. I was wrong. The sound you need to be afraid of is humming, especially when every person in the room stops moving at the exact same time and you realize the tune is not coming from their mouths. My name is Lucas Bennett, and before Marrow Creek Diner, I had worked in enough roadside restaurants to believe I understood night shifts. I knew the language of burnt coffee, tired truckers, sticky menus, and fluorescent lights that made everyone look a little sick. I knew how to smile at people who did not smile back, how to refill a mug without asking, how to tell if someone wanted conversation or just wanted eggs and silence. At 32, I was not proud of still wearing aprons for a living, but I was good at it, and good was supposed to count for something. Then the last place I worked shut down with 3 days of warning, and good stopped matching. My rent was late, my checking account was almost empty, and my old Chevy needed a new alternator if I wanted it to keep starting on cold mornings. I spent a week applying to every restaurant within 30 miles of my apartment outside Dayton, Ohio, and most of them either ignored me or offered hours that would not cover gas. By Friday night, I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cold cup of instant coffee, a stack of bills, and a phone screen full of job listings I had already read twice. That was when I saw the post. Midnight shift server needed. Marrow Creek Diner. Route 26. 11:30 at night to 6 in the morning. $250 cash per night. Start tonight. I remember staring at that number like it might disappear if I blinked. $250 for one overnight shift was too much for a roadside diner, especially one I had never heard of. The listing had no logo, no company name, no cheerful description about fast-paced team environments. Just the hours, the pay, and one sentence at the bottom. Must be able to follow house rules exactly. I should have closed the page right there. Instead, I hit apply and sent my phone number. 3 minutes later, it rang. The woman on the other end had a low, rough voice, the kind that sounded like coffee, cigarettes, and years of telling people no. She said her name was Marlene Shaw, night manager at Marrow Creek. She asked if I had serving experience, if I could handle being alone with customers, if I knew how to work a grill in an emergency, and if I scared easily. I laughed a little at that last one because I thought it was a joke. She did not laugh with me. I told her I had worked diners, truck stops, and late shifts for most of my adult life. She went quiet for a moment, and in the background I heard something faint, a low steady note like a refrigerator humming through a wall. Then she asked, "Can you keep your eyes closed when someone tells you to?" I looked around my kitchen as if the answer might be written somewhere between the unpaid electric bill and my dead car key fob. "If it is part of the job," I said, "sure." Marlene exhaled slowly. "Be here by 11:15. Wear black pants. I will give you an apron. Do not stop for anyone on Route 26 after mile marker 12. Before I could ask what that meant, she hung up. I sat there with the phone in my hand, telling myself it was just an old woman with a strange sense of humor. Every night shift had its rituals. Every diner had weird regulars, broken equipment, and rules that sounded dramatic until you worked there long enough to understand them. Maybe they had trouble with drifters on the highway. Maybe the place had been robbed before. Maybe Marlene was just testing whether I could take instructions without arguing. That was the second lie I told myself. The first was thinking I had a choice. By 10:30, I had showered, put on black pants, a dark shirt, and my only clean jacket, then scraped together enough gas money to reach Route 26 and get back if the job turned out fake. As I locked my apartment, my neighbor's television murmured through the wall, and someone outside started a truck with a tired engine cough. Normal sounds. Human sounds. I held onto them longer than I realized. Because later that night, when the humming started under the floor of Marrow Creek Diner, I would have given anything to hear traffic, arguing neighbors, a dog barking, anything that proved the world outside was still there. Route 26 looked normal for the first few miles, which made Marlene's warning feel even more ridiculous. It was just an old two-lane highway cutting through rural Ohio, dark fields on both sides, mailboxes leaning at the ends of gravel driveways, the occasional porch light glowing in the distance. My headlights swept over road signs, bare trees, and long stretches of cracked pavement silvered by a thin layer of mist. The radio in my Chevy only picked up 2 stations out there. One was a country song fading in and out under static, and the other was a late-night preacher talking about roads that lead people where they are meant to go. I turned both off and drove in silence. Around mile marker 12, I saw a car pulled onto the shoulder with its hazard lights blinking. An older sedan, dark green maybe, though it was hard to tell in the fog. A person stood beside the open driver's door, one arm raised like they needed help. My foot eased off the gas before I remembered Marlene's exact words. Do not stop for anyone on Route 26 after mile marker 12. I felt foolish for taking it seriously, but my hand tightened on the wheel anyway. The person by the sedan did not wave. They just held that arm up at the same angle, perfectly still, as my headlights passed over them. For half a second, I thought their face was turned away. Then I realized they did not seem to have a face at all, only a pale blur where features should have been. I drove faster. My heart started beating harder than the situation deserved, and I told myself it was fog, distance, and nerves. People look strange in headlights. People in trouble can freeze up. I should have stopped. A decent person would have stopped, but another part of me was grateful when the red hazard lights vanished behind me. 12 minutes later, the road curved downhill, and Marrow Creek Diner appeared at the bottom like the last lit room in the world. It was smaller than I expected, a low white building with chrome trim, red vinyl awnings, and a neon open sign blinking in the front window. The sign did not glow steady. It pulsed, dim to bright, almost like it was breathing. A gravel lot stretched around the diner, empty except for an old blue pickup parked near the kitchen entrance. Beyond that, the highway disappeared into black fields and fog. There were no houses nearby, no gas station, no motel, no other businesses. Just the diner, the road, and the dark. I parked beside the pickup and checked the time. 11:17 p.m. My hands were damp on the steering wheel. I sat there for a few seconds, listening to the engine tick after I shut it off, watching the open sign paint red light across the windshield. I almost called Marlene to ask if I was in the right place, but the front door opened before I touched my phone. A woman stepped out and stood under the small metal awning. She was in her late 50s, maybe early 60s, with pale skin, short gray hair pinned back, and a face that looked carved more by exhaustion than age. She wore a white cook's shirt under a dark cardigan, black pants, and a stained apron tied tight at the waist. In one hand, she held a coffee mug. In the other, a ring of keys. She did not smile. "Lucas Bennett?" she called. Her voice carried clearly across the empty lot. I got out and nodded. The cold hit me immediately. Not winter cold, but the damp kind that slides under your jacket and settles between your shoulders. "You are late," she said. I looked at my phone again. "It is 11:17. You said 11:15. That is late." She stepped aside and motioned me in. The second I crossed the threshold, she locked the door behind me. I turned at the sound of the bolt sliding into place. "You lock it during business hours?" I asked. "Only after 11. Marlene walked past me toward the counter. "Customers who belong here can still get in." I waited for her to explain that. She did not. Inside, the diner looked like something preserved from another decade. Red vinyl booths lined the windows, their surfaces cracked but clean. A long counter ran along the kitchen side with chrome stools bolted to the floor. A glass pie case sat near the register, empty except for one slice of pecan pie under a cloudy plastic cover. The coffee machine hissed behind the counter, giving off that burnt smell every diner worker knows by heart. A jukebox stood against the far wall, unplugged, or at least it looked unplugged. The power cord lay coiled on the floor beneath it. Above the front door hung a brass bell on a bent metal bracket. I noticed it because it swayed slightly, even though the door was closed. The clock on the wall said 11:21 p.m., but the second hand dragged like it was tired. Marlene handed me a black apron and pointed toward the small employee hallway near the kitchen. "Locker is on the left. Put your jacket away. Keep your phone on silent. If it rings after midnight, do not answer unless you are outside this building." I tied the apron around my waist, trying to laugh lightly. "You have a lot of rules for a place with no customers." She finally looked me directly in the eye. Her eyes were gray and sharp, the kind of tired that had not slept right in years. "That is because customers are not the problem." Before I could respond, headlights swept across the front windows from the highway. I turned, expecting to see a car pulling in, but the gravel lot was empty. The red open sign flickered, then steadied. Marlene reached under the counter and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, yellowed at the edges and laminated badly, like someone had tried to protect it after it was already too old. She placed it beside the register and tapped it twice with one finger. "Read this before midnight," she said. "Do not skim it. Do not make jokes about it. And if the humming starts before you finish, close your eyes and wait for me to tell you when to open them." I looked down at the paper. Across the top, in block letters, it said "House Rules After Midnight." My mouth went dry before I understood why. Outside the front windows, the highway was empty, but the bell over the door gave one soft ring. The bell over the door gave one soft ring, then stopped with the door still locked and the gravel lot still empty. I looked from the bell to Marlene, waiting for her to react the way a normal person would if something in her diner moved by itself. She did not even blink. She just turned the laminated sheet around so it faced me and tapped the top line again. "Read," she said. "Out loud?" I asked, mostly because my mouth needed something to do besides go dry. "No," she said. "Never read them out loud." That was the first moment I stopped wanting to laugh. I picked up the sheet and felt the cheap plastic flecks under my fingers. The rules had been typed years ago, maybe on an old office computer, but some words had been darkened with pen, and one entire line had been underlined so many times the ink looked almost burned into the paper. Rule number 1. Do not greet customers first. Let them speak before you do. Rule number 2. Never ask where someone is headed. If they tell you anyway, forget it before sunrise. Rule number 3. Refill coffee only when the cup handle points toward the door. If the handle points toward the wall, leave the cup alone. Rule number 4. When the humming starts, close your eyes until the bell above the door rings twice. Do not count anything else as permission. I paused there, staring at that line longer than the others. "What does that mean?" I asked. Marlene was wiping the same clean section of counter with a white towel. "It means close your eyes when the humming starts. And if I do not," the towel stopped moving, "then it gets a better look at you." I wanted to ask what it was, but the way she said the word made the question lodge in my throat. I kept reading. Rule number 5. Do not serve anyone sitting in booth 7 unless Marlene serves them first. Rule number 6. If someone asks for breakfast before 2 a.m., bring black coffee and nothing else. Rule number 7. Never enter the walk-in freezer while the floor is humming. Rule number 8. At 5:30 a.m., turn off the open sign even if customers are still inside. There were 8 rules in total, followed by 4 names written in different handwriting. Marlene Shaw was the last one. Above hers were names I did not recognize: Peter Lang, Ruth Calloway, Dennis Pike. The first 2 had been crossed out with a single thin line. Dennis Pike had been scratched over so heavily I could barely read it. I looked up at Marlene. "Is this some kind of training thing?" "Yes." "For what?" She folded the towel once and set it beside the coffee machine. "For living until 6. The coffee machine hissed loudly, and I jumped. Marlene noticed, but she did not smile. "You worked diners before," she said. "That will help until it hurts you. Your hands know habits. Your brain will not stop in time. You will want to greet people. You will want to refill cups. You will want to ask where they are driving from because that is what tired servers do when the night feels too quiet. Do not." I swallowed. "You are serious." "I am tired," she said. "Those are different things." The wall clock ticked toward midnight with that dragging second hand. I tried to memorize the rules, but my thoughts kept slipping back to the bell, to the locked door, to the headlights I had seen without a car. I told myself there had to be a rational explanation. Maybe the doorframe shifted in the cold and shook the bell. Maybe a truck passed on the highway at just the right angle. Maybe Marlene liked scaring new hires because it kept them alert. But I had worked with strange managers before, and none of them spoke like they were giving instructions before a storm. At 11:48 p.m., Marlene showed me the basics. Coffee filters under the counter. Mug stacked handle out. Register did not take cards after midnight because, according to her, the line does not know where to send the charge. I assumed she meant the phone line was bad. The grill stayed off unless she turned it on. The pie case was not to be opened. The jukebox was not to be touched. Booth 7, the last booth by the far window, was not to be cleaned unless the seat was empty in the reflection too. That last part made me look over. Booth 7 was empty. In the window reflection, for just a second, the red vinyl seat looked pressed down in the middle, like someone invisible had been sitting there a long time. I blinked, and it was normal again. My skin prickled along my arms. "You saw something," Marlene said. "No," I lied automatically. "Good," she replied. "Keep doing that." At 11:56 p.m., she handed me a pot of coffee and told me to stand behind the counter, not in front of it. Until the first customer spoke. How will they get in if the door is locked? I asked. Marlene checked the wall clock. Customers who belong here can still get in, she said again. The words felt worse the second time. At 12 a.m. exactly, the open sign flickered 3 times. The brass bell above the door rang once. The lock did not move. The door did not open. Still, a man in a dark raincoat was suddenly standing inside the diner, water dripping from the hem onto the tile even though the night outside was dry. He did not look at me. He walked to booth 7 and sat facing the window. My mouth opened on reflex, ready to say, "Welcome in." Marlene's hand closed around my wrist so fast the words died behind my teeth. Her fingers were cold. The man in booth 7 placed a white coffee cup on the table. The handle pointed toward the wall. The coffee cup sat on the table with its handle pointed toward the wall, and for a few seconds that was the only thing in the diner I could look at. Not the man in the raincoat. Not the water gathering beneath his booth in a dark little puddle. Not Marlene's hand around my wrist, cold and firm enough to keep me from moving. Just that cup, turned the wrong way according to a rule I had read less than 5 minutes earlier. Every server has habits that live deeper than thought. Someone sits down, you greet them. Someone has an empty cup, you fill it. Someone looks cold, you ask if they want something hot. That is how the job works. That is how you keep tips coming and complaints away. So when the man in booth 7 lifted one finger and tapped the rim of his cup, my body wanted to move before my brain could stop it. Marlene's grip tightened. "Wait," she whispered. The man did not turn his head. His face was angled toward the window, but the glass reflected only the booth, the table, and the red neon from the open sign. There was no reflection of him. I felt my throat close. I told myself it was the angle. Old windows warp reflections. Neon washes out detail. I had seen weirder things in truck stop glass at 3 in the morning. Then the man spoke. Without looking at us. "Coffee." His voice was low and wet, like he was talking through a mouthful of rain. Marlene let go of my wrist and picked up the coffee pot herself. She walked to booth 7 with the slow, careful steps of someone approaching a sleeping animal. I watched the cup handle. It still pointed toward the wall. Rule number 3 said to refill only when the handle pointed toward the door. Marlene did not pour. She placed the pot on the table, reached 2 fingers toward the cup, and turned it clockwise until the handle faced the front entrance. The man's shoulders stiffened. For the first time, I saw his hand clearly on the table. It was pale, wrinkled from water, and resting too flat against the surface. Marlene poured coffee until the cup was half full, then stepped back without saying a word. The man raised the cup. He did not drink. He held it under his nose as if smelling something from far away. Then he whispered, "Not him." Marlene's face did not change. "Not tonight." My stomach sank because I knew they were talking about me. I almost asked what that meant, but rule number 2 came back before I opened my mouth. Never ask where someone is headed. If they tell you anyway, forget it before sunrise. It did not say anything about asking what they wanted with you, but I was starting to understand that the rules were not a menu. They were a fence. You did not lean on a fence just because one board looked harmless. The man sat there for 11 minutes. I know because I watched the wall clock instead of watching him. The second hand dragged around the face in slow, tired ticks. 12:04 a.m. 12:07 a.m. 12:10 a.m. Outside, no cars passed. Inside, the coffee machine hissed. The refrigerator motor clicked on and off, and the raincoat man breathed in long, shallow pulls though his cup never touched his lips. At 12:11 a.m., he stood. The booth cushion stayed pressed down after his weight left it. He walked to the door. The bell did not ring. The lock did not turn. He was simply gone between one blink and the next, leaving a wet trail that stopped halfway across the tile. I stared at the empty booth, waiting for the cushion to rise. It did not. "Do not clean it," Marlene said. "But it is wet." "Then let it be wet." She took the coffee pot from the table and poured everything left inside down the sink. First customer is always a measure. A measure of what? I asked before I could stop myself. Marlene looked at me sharply, and for one terrible second I thought I had broken a rule. Then she shook her head. Of how badly the diner wants the new person. I laughed once, too soft and nervous to sound real. "You keep saying the diner like it is alive." "No," she said. "I say the diner because that is safer than saying what is under it." The floor beneath my shoes gave a faint vibration. It was so subtle, I thought at first that a truck had passed on the highway. I looked toward the windows. The road outside was empty, fog sitting low over the pavement. The vibration came again, softer this time, running through the tile and up into my ankles. The jukebox against the wall clicked. Its power cord was still coiled on the floor, unplugged. A red light bloomed behind the glass, weak at first, then brighter, illuminating the old song list inside. Marlene turned toward it slowly. Her face had gone still in a way I did not like. "Do not look at booth 7, she said. The words hit me half a second too late. Because the moment she said them, every part of me wanted to look. It was not curiosity exactly. It was pressure, like someone had placed a hand gently on the back of my head and started turning it. My eyes slid toward the far window before I could stop them. Booth 7 was empty, but the cushion was still depressed, and the coffee cup was back on the table. I had watched Marlene carry it away. I knew I had. Now it sat there again, handle pointing toward the wall. The jukebox began to play without music. No melody, no words, just a low mechanical tone vibrating through its speakers. My chest tightened. "Lucas," Marlene said. Her voice sounded farther away than it should have. "Behind the counter." Now. I backed up until the counter pressed into my spine. The tone from the jukebox sank lower, spreading through the floor, through the chrome stools, through the coffee cups stacked beside the machine. One by one, the cups began to tremble. Not rattle. Tremble. Like something beneath the diner was drawing a breath, and the whole building was trying not to answer. I looked at Marlene. Her eyes were already closing. She raised one finger to her lips, then pointed down at the rule sheet. Rule number 4. When the humming starts, close your eyes until the bell above the door rings twice. Do not count anything else as permission. The sound under the floor changed then. It stopped being a mechanical tone and became a voice without words, a long, soft humming that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Under the counter, behind the walls, inside the coffee and the cups. My skin prickled so hard it hurt. I shut my eyes. For 1 second, all I could see was darkness. Then, from booth 7, the man in the raincoat whispered, "Good. Now we can see which one of you opens them first." I kept my eyes closed because the rule told me to, but every instinct I had was screaming that blindness was the worst possible thing in that room. The humming pressed against my face like warm breath. It vibrated through the counter behind my back, through the soles of my shoes, through my teeth until my jaw ached. I could hear Marlene somewhere to my left, breathing slowly, deliberately, like she had practiced surviving this sound for years. I tried to match her rhythm. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Do not think about booth 7. Do not think about the cup. Do not think about the man in the raincoat asking which one of us would open our eyes first. The bell had to ring twice. That was all. 2 rings. Not the jukebox clicking. Not the coffee machine hissing. Not the floor humming. The bell. The first ring came after what felt like a full minute. Clear, brass, and sharp above the door. My eyelids twitched. My shoulders loosened before I caught myself. 1 ring was not enough. I dug my fingernails lightly into my palms, using the small sting to keep myself anchored. Then I heard Marlene gasp. Not a scream. Not even loud. Just a quick, pained breath from behind the counter, followed by the sound of something metal hitting the tile. A spoon maybe. Or a knife. Or the coffee pot. My eyes almost opened. That was the trick. It had to be. But Marlene made another sound. This time lower, like she was trying to stand and could not. I whispered her name before I remembered no one had told me talking was safe. The humming shifted the moment I spoke. It turned toward me. I do not know how else to describe it. The sound did not get louder, but the attention inside it moved. The air in front of my closed eyes felt suddenly crowded. "Lucas," Marlene said from the left. Her voice was thin. "Do not." Then Marlene said my name again from the right. Same voice. Same tired rasp. "Lucas, help me." My stomach dropped. The real Marlene had been left of me near the coffee machine. I was almost sure of it. Unless she had moved. Unless the humming made sound bend. Unless panic had scrambled the room in my head. The second Marlene coughed, and the noise came from behind the counter near the floor. "I fell," she said. "Open your eyes for 1 second." My hands started shaking. I told myself it was not her. I told myself the rule was simple. I told myself Marlene would be angry if I opened my eyes, not grateful. Then I heard a wet dragging sound near my shoes and felt cold air slide across my ankles from beneath the counter. My body betrayed me. I opened my right eye just a slit. It was less than a second. Less than a full breath. I only meant to check if Marlene was hurt. The diner was dark except for the red pulse of the open sign and the low glow of the jukebox. The cups on the counter trembled in perfect little circles. Marlene stood exactly where she had been, eyes shut, one hand gripping the edge of the coffee machine, face tight with warning. She had not fallen. She had not moved. The voice had not been hers. Then my gaze dropped. Under the counter, where there should have been tile, storage shelves, and the rubber mat for standing long shifts, there was a narrow black seam in the floor. It had not been there before. It ran from the base of the pie case toward the kitchen, straight and dark, like the diner had cracked open along a line no contractor had ever made. The humming came from inside that seam, not out of it. Inside it, deep below the floor, layered and patient. And for that tiny moment while my eye was open, the seam stopped humming. It listened. I slammed my eyes shut so hard tears squeezed out. The second bell rang immediately after, loud enough to make me flinch. The humming cut off. The jukebox went dark. The cups stopped trembling. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then Marlene said, very quietly, "You opened them." I opened both eyes because the bell had rung twice, but I already knew I had done something I could not undo. Marlene was staring at me from behind the counter. She did not look angry. That was worse. She looked tired in a new way, like I had just added years to a life that already had too many. "I thought you were hurt," I said. My voice sounded small. "It sounded like you. It always sounds like the person you would break a rule for." She walked to the counter and placed both hands flat on the chrome edge. The skin around her knuckles was pale. "How much did you see?" I swallowed. "A crack in the floor." Her eyes closed for half a second. "Anything inside it?" "No." "Did it stop humming when you looked?" I did not answer fast enough. She turned away and muttered something under her breath I could not catch. Outside, the highway remained empty, but the open sign reflected in the window like a red eye blinking slowly. "What is down there?" I asked. Marlene took the rule sheet from beside the register and folded it once, carefully, as if sudden movement might wake the building again. "Something that has been under this place longer than the road has been here." That does not answer my question. It is the only answer that has kept people alive. She pointed toward the booths without looking. Before this was a diner, it was a rest stop. Before that, a service station. Before that, just a place where people pulled off the old county road because they felt tired at the same mile marker. The building changes. The thing underneath does not. My mouth tasted bitter, like old coffee. And the humming? Marlene looked at the front windows. "It does not have eyes the way we do. It uses sound to find openings. A person hears the humming and wants to know where it comes from. They look. That gives it shape, direction, distance." She turned back to me. "You only gave it a glimpse. That is better than most." Better than most did not feel comforting. The wall clock read 1:18 a.m., though I was sure the humming had lasted longer than 12 minutes. Booth 7 was empty again. The coffee cup was gone. But in the window reflection, for one brief second, I saw the dark seam under the counter reflected too, wider than it looked in the room, and something far below it shifted like it had just learned where to look next. Marlene noticed my face and followed my eyes to the glass. "Do not use reflections tonight," she said. "Not anymore." Then, from somewhere beneath the floor, too low to be heard with my ears but clear enough to feel in my chest, the humming returned for one single note, and it sounded almost like my name. Marlene did not speak for almost a full minute after that single note faded under the floor. She just stood behind the counter with one hand on the folded rule sheet and the other resting near the coffee pot, watching the tile like she expected it to breathe again. The diner looked normal in all the ways that made it harder to trust. Red booths, chrome stools, pie case, coffee machine. Fog pressed against the windows, but the highway beyond was empty and still. If someone had walked in right then, someone ordinary, someone with tired eyes and a jacket smelling like cigarette smoke and diesel, I might have convinced myself the last hour had been panic and bad lighting. Then the wall clock clicked from 1:19 a.m. to 2:02 a.m. in one jump. My stomach turned cold. Marlene noticed me staring and nodded once, like that had happened before. "It skips the quiet parts after it gets a look at you," she said. "Why?" My voice sounded rough. "Because it knows you are listening now." She reached under the counter and pulled out a black composition notebook, the kind students use for school. The corners were soft, the cover stained with coffee rings, and a strip of masking tape on the front said night log. She slid it across to me. Read the last 3 pages. Do not read any names out loud. I opened it carefully. The handwriting changed every few pages. Some entries were neat. Others leaned so hard across the lines they looked written in a moving car. Peter Lang wrote about hearing humming in the vents and waking up at home with diner sugar packets in his shoes. Ruth Calloway wrote that booth 7 stayed warm for hours after no one was sitting there. Dennis Pike wrote only one sentence on his last page, over and over until the pen tore the paper. It does not have eyes, so it borrows ours. I read that line 3 times, and each time the diner felt smaller. That is what you meant, I said. It uses people to see the road. Marlene nodded. The road, the town, the houses beyond it. Anything outside the diner. The building keeps it contained, but people are weak points. Eyes are doors if something knows how to knock. I shut the notebook, but my hand stayed on the cover. Then why keep the diner open? Because closed doors make hungry things creative. She said it like an old lesson, not a metaphor. People used to disappear on this stretch before Marrow Creek had rules. Drivers would pull over because they heard music, or crying, or somebody calling from the ditch. They would look into the dark, and something below would look through them. The diner gives it a place to come close without getting out. My throat went dry. So this place is bait. This place is a lid. The refrigerator motor cut off, and the sudden silence made both of us look toward the kitchen. Beyond the swinging door, a thin white line of cold air slipped out along the floor. The walk-in freezer. I remembered rule number 7. Never enter the walk-in freezer while the floor is humming. I did not hear humming, not exactly, but the tile under my shoes had started to vibrate in tiny pulses, like a distant engine idling beneath the building. Marlene saw me notice. Stay behind the counter. I am behind the counter. Farther. I stepped back until my hip touched the register. The freezer door gave a soft metallic pop. Not open, not closed, just loose enough that the seal had broken. Cold fog rolled into the kitchen and curled around the bottom of the swinging door. Then my own voice came from inside the freezer. I can see the road now. Every muscle in my body locked. It was my voice, but not the way you hear yourself in a recording. It was the voice from inside my head, the one that thinks before you speak. Same rhythm, same tired edge, same Ohio flatness I had never noticed until something else wore it. Marlene whispered, "Do not answer." The voice in the freezer laughed softly. I had never heard myself laugh like that, but I recognized the attempt. "Your alternator is going to die before sunrise," it said. "You know that, right? You should have stayed home." My hands began to shake. "How does it know that?" "Because you opened your eye." The floor pulsed again, deeper this time. The freezer voice continued, almost conversational. "Rent due Monday. $217 in checking. Mother's birthday on April 9th. You still have her last voicemail saved, but you have not listened to it in 3 years." My breath caught so sharply it hurt. Marlene's head turned just enough for me to see her expression. Pity. That was what nearly broke me. Not fear. Pity. The freezer door opened another inch. The cold coming out smelled wrong. Not rotten, not spoiled, but old, like air sealed away before I was born. "Lucas," my voice said softer now. "Come here. I want to show you what she saw before she left." My mother had died in a hospital room in Cincinnati 5 years earlier. There was nothing in that freezer that knew her. There could not be. But the sentence found the part of me that still wanted one more answer, one more impossible kindness. My feet shifted before I realized it. Marlene slapped her palm flat on the counter. The sound cracked through the room and stopped me. "That is not your mother." I closed my eyes for one breath, not because of humming, but because I needed the world to stop showing me doors. "It does not need to know the truth," Marlene said. "It only needs to know which lie you will walk toward." The freezer voice changed then. It became Marlene's. "He is not ready," it said from the cold. "Give me the boy and take the morning." Marlene went pale. For the first time all night, she looked genuinely afraid. The tile under us began to hum, low and steady. Rule number 7 was active now. She reached for the freezer handle, and I grabbed her sleeve without thinking. "Do not." She looked at my hand, then at me. "If it keeps talking in my voice, it means it has remembered me." What does that mean? The freezer door opened another inch by itself. From inside, Marlene's voice began humming the same soft tune from under the floor. The real Marlene pulled her sleeve free and whispered, "It means the next time it calls, I may answer." The humming from inside the freezer did not spread through the diner all at once. It moved carefully, like it was testing the floor before putting its full weight on it. First, the metal counter vibrated beneath my fingertips. Then the coffee cups beside the machine began to tremble in tiny circles. Then the red open sign in the front window flickered once, twice, and held steady on a dim glow that made the glass look wet. Marlene stood between me and the kitchen door with her shoulders rigid, one hand half raised as if she was listening for something only she could hear. The voice in the freezer had stopped speaking, but the silence behind that door felt crowded. I wanted to ask what we were supposed to do next, but every rule I had learned so far seemed to punish the first person who spoke. So I waited. My heart beat so hard I could feel it in my throat. The walk-in freezer door clicked wider. Cold air pushed through the kitchen and rolled into the diner around our shoes. The humming inside it shifted pitch, and for one breath, it sounded exactly like me clearing my throat before a long shift. Then it spoke in my voice again. "Marlene, he is going to open his eyes next time. You know he will." I looked at her, expecting anger, but she did not look surprised. She looked ashamed. "Do not listen," she said. "That includes me." "What does that mean?" I whispered. She reached under the counter and pulled out a small silver service bell, the kind diners keep near the register for impatient customers. I had not noticed it before. She placed it in front of me. "If I start humming before the doorbell rings twice, you keep your eyes closed and you ring this once." What happens when I ring it? It reminds the diner who is working the counter. That did not answer anything, but I was beginning to understand that answers in Marrow Creek were less useful than instructions. The floor hummed harder. The freezer voice changed again, becoming Marlene's voice, but younger somehow, lighter and less tired. "You promised you would not make someone else do this." The real Marlene flinched. It was small, just a tightening around her eyes, but I saw it. The thing had found her soft place too. "Marlene," I said carefully, "what is it talking about?" She stared at the kitchen door. "The last person I trained was Dennis Pike." I remembered the name scratched almost completely out in the night log. What happened to him? He opened the freezer because he heard his little brother calling from inside. His brother had been dead since 1987. Her voice stayed flat, but her hand tightened around the counter edge. I should have stopped him faster. I should have rung the bell. I did not. From the freezer, younger Marlene whispered, "You let him go." The humming thickened until the windows began to buzz in their frames. My eyes watered from the pressure in the air. I wanted to cover my ears, but I was afraid moving too much would count as answering. The real Marlene turned to me then. "Listen to me. It does not copy people perfectly. Not at first. It copies the reason you would follow them. Your mother. My guilt. Your own voice telling you that you are already doomed. It does not need to be true. It only needs to make you choose wrong." The freezer door opened another inch. The cold spilling out now carried the smell of old coffee grounds and wet gravel, like the highway after rain. My voice came from inside, softer than before. "Lucas, the road is right here." I looked toward the front windows. Outside, Route 26 was gone. Not hidden by fog. Gone. Beyond the glass was only a gray-black emptiness, flat and endless, with the red open sign reflected over it like a warning light. My knees went weak. I stepped backward, but the counter caught me. "Do not look outside," Marlene said. "There is nothing outside right now that wants to stay outside." The service bell under my hand felt ice cold. I understood then that the diner was not simply being haunted. It was holding a line. The road, the lights, the customers, even the ridiculous coffee rules were parts of a system built to keep whatever lived below from finding a route into the world beyond the windows. And I had given it a glimpse through my eyes. The freezer voice began humming again, this time in Marlene's rhythm. The real Marlene's lips parted. For one terrible second, the same note came from her throat. She clamped both hands over her mouth and squeezed her eyes shut. I grabbed the service bell. "Marlene." She shook her head hard, warning me not to come closer. The note slipped out again, small but unmistakable. The diner reacted instantly. Booth 7 creaked. The jukebox lit up red. The bell above the front door trembled but did not ring. "Close your eyes," Marlene forced out through clenched teeth. "Now." I did. Darkness dropped over me, but the diner did not disappear. I could hear every booth cushion shifting, every spoon turning on every saucer, every drop of coffee quivering in every cup. Marlene was humming now, softly, trying to swallow it and failing. The sound hurt to hear because it still sounded human. It sounded like someone losing an argument inside her own chest. From the freezer, my voice whispered, "If you ring that bell, she stays. If you do not, she gets to rest." That was the cruelest lie because part of me wanted it to be mercy. My hand hovered over the service bell. The rule sheet said nothing about this bell. Nothing about Marlene becoming part of the humming. Nothing about what I would cost someone by surviving. Then I remembered what she had said. It only needs to make you choose wrong. I pressed the service bell once. The sharp ring cut through the humming like a clean line. Marlene gasped. The freezer door slammed shut by itself, and every window in the diner rattled at the same time. I kept my eyes closed, waiting for the brass bell over the door. It did not ring. Instead, Marlene whispered from somewhere very close to me. "Good. Now you run the shift alone until it tries again." For a few minutes after I rang the service bell, Marrow Creek Diner seemed almost normal again, but I knew better by then. Normal did not mean safe. Normal was just the mask the place wore between attempts. Marlene stayed near the coffee machine with one hand pressed against the counter, breathing through her nose, her face pale under the yellow kitchen light. She did not thank me for ringing the bell. She did not have to. The look she gave me said enough. It also told me something worse. Whatever was under the diner had touched her more deeply than she wanted to admit, and the next time it called in her voice, she might not be able to stop herself from answering. The wall clock read 3:12 a.m., though it had been 2:02 only minutes ago, and the second hand was no longer dragging. It moved too smoothly now, sweeping around the face without ticking, as if time had stopped being measured and started being poured. Marlene slid the rule sheet toward me. "Read number 4 again," she said. My eyes went to the line before she finished speaking. "When the humming starts, close your eyes until the bell above the door rings twice. Do not count anything else as permission. Now read number 8. At 5:30 a.m., turn off the open sign even if customers are still inside." I looked up. It is not even close to 5:30. It will be sooner than you think. The open sign in the window pulsed red against the fog. Outside, Route 26 had returned, or at least something shaped like it had. The road stretched away into darkness, empty and wet, with no headlights in either direction. "What happens at 3:33? I asked. Marlene's mouth tightened. "The diner fills." At exactly 3:33 a.m., the brass bell above the locked front door rang once. I turned toward it before I could stop myself. The door did not open, but every booth in the diner was suddenly occupied. No footsteps. No entry. No rush of cold air. One blink, empty booths. Next blink, customers. Men in work jackets. Women in old church clothes. A teenage boy in a baseball uniform stained with dust. An elderly couple holding hands over untouched coffee. A trucker with his cap pulled so low I could not see his face. They all sat perfectly still, heads bowed, eyes lowered to the tables. Every cup handle pointed toward the wall. Every plate was empty. Every napkin dispenser faced the wrong direction. My hand went numb around the edge of the rule sheet. Marlene whispered, "Do not serve them." The coffee machine hissed behind us, and every head in the diner tilted a fraction toward the sound. Not up, not enough to look at us, just enough to acknowledge we were there. The jukebox lit red across the room. Its cord still lay unplugged. A song did not play. Instead, the first note of humming rose from booth 7. It was low, almost gentle. Then booth 5 joined. Then the counter stools. Then the couple by the window. The sound spread from person to person without mouths opening, as if the tune was moving through the furniture, through the plates, through the coffee cooling in each cup. Marlene grabbed my wrist the way she had earlier, but this time her hand was shaking. "Eyes closed," she said. I closed them. Darkness swallowed the diner, but the humming became sharper, clearer, more detailed. I could tell where every customer sat by the way the sound pressed against me from different directions. Booth 7 hummed deepest. The counter stools hummed, like metal vibrating under a bridge. The floor beneath us answered with a note so low I felt it in my knees. Someone at the far end of the diner spoke in my mother's voice. "Lucas, open your eyes. I am right here." I clenched my teeth. Another voice, my own, whispered from the freezer. "The road is open now." Marlene's grip tightened. Then, very softly, Marlene began to hum. My chest went cold. It was not loud. It was barely a thread of sound, but it came from right beside me, from the real woman holding my wrist. She tried to stop. I heard her breath catch, heard her swallow, heard the note slip out again anyway. The customers hummed louder, welcoming it. The open sign buzzed in the window, and I knew without looking that it was glowing brighter. Rule number 4 told me to keep my eyes shut. Rule number 8 told me the sign had to be turned off at 5:30 a.m. But time was wrong, and the thing under the diner was not waiting for the clock anymore. It was using Marlene. "Lucas," she whispered, voice trembling beneath the hum. "Do not open your eyes." "What do I do?" I asked. "You already know." I did not. Not at first. Then I felt the service bell under my left hand on the counter. It reminded the diner who was working the counter. I rang it once. The sound cut clean through the customer's humming, and Marlene inhaled sharply, but the bell above the door did not ring. The customers continued. I rang the service bell again. Somewhere near booth 7, a chair scraped backward. "Not that bell," a voice whispered from the dining room. "Wrong bell." I kept my eyes closed and reached toward where I knew the counter ended. My fingers brushed the wall, then the row of switches beside the register. One controlled the overhead lights. One controlled the sign. I had seen Marlene use it earlier. I searched by touch while the diner argued around me in borrowed voices. My landlord telling me rent was due. My old boss saying I was unreliable. My mother asking why I never called back. My own voice saying I would not make it home anyway. Then Marlene's hand released my wrist. Her humming grew louder as she stepped away from me. "Marlene," I said, but she did not answer. I heard her shoes cross the tile toward the kitchen, toward the freezer. The customers' humming swelled with excitement. My fingers found a switch. I did not know if it was the right one, but I flipped it down. The red glow behind my eyelids vanished. The open sign went off. The diner reacted like something enormous had been denied a breath. Every cup slammed against every saucer at once. The humming collapsed into a single low note beneath the floor. Then the brass bell over the door rang once. I kept my eyes shut, shaking so badly my teeth clicked together. The rule said twice. The freezer door opened. I heard Marlene exhale, calm now, almost relieved. "Do not follow me," she said. "No," I whispered. "I can help." "You already did." The brass bell rang a second time. The humming stopped. I opened my eyes. The diner was empty. Every booth, every stool, every table. No customers. No fog against the windows. No road. Missing beyond the glass. The open sign was dark. The freezer door stood closed. Marlene was gone, but her apron lay on the tile in front of the kitchen, folded neatly as if someone had placed it there for the next shift. For a while after Marlene disappeared, I did not move. I stood behind the counter with one hand still resting on the switch that had turned off the open sign, staring at the folded apron on the tile in front of the kitchen. The diner had gone so quiet that I could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead and the slow drip of coffee from the machine into an empty pot. Outside, the fog had thinned. The highway was back, pale and wet under the first gray wash of morning, stretching in both directions like a road should. No impossible emptiness beyond the windows. No customers sitting with their heads bowed. No humming under the floor. Just Route 26, the gravel lot, Marlene's old blue pickup, and my Chevy sitting beside it with a thin layer of mist on the windshield. I wanted to believe that meant I had survived. I wanted to believe the rules had worked, that Marlene had done whatever she had to do, and that I could leave before the diner changed its mind. My legs felt weak as I stepped out from behind the counter. The tile did not vibrate under my shoes. The jukebox was dark. Booth 7 was empty, and this time I did not look at the window reflection to make sure. I picked up Marlene's apron because leaving it on the floor felt wrong. It was still warm. That almost broke me more than if it had been cold. I set it gently on the counter beside the rule sheet and checked the wall clock. It read 5:30 a.m. The second hand was ticking normally again. Then I looked at my phone. 4:17 a.m. My chest tightened. I checked the wall clock again. 5:30 a.m. The diner had given me the time it needed me to see, not the real time. The rule had said to turn off the open sign at 5:30 a.m. even if customers were still inside. I had done it early, or maybe the diner had moved the clock forward because Marlene was about to become the opening it wanted. Either way, the sign was off, and the road outside was still there. That was the first thing that felt wrong after the silence. The second was the rule sheet. It had been laminated when Marlene handed it to me, sealed under cloudy plastic, the 8 rules preserved like some strange old menu. Now the bottom edge was split open as if someone had peeled it apart from the inside. Beneath rule number 8, a new line had appeared in fresh black ink. Rule number 9, if the night manager is gone at sunrise, the new server must keep the house rules. I read it once. Then again. The words did not change. Under the old names at the bottom, a new signature had been added in handwriting that looked exactly like mine. Lucas Bennett. My hand went cold around the paper. I had not signed anything. I had not agreed to anything. But the diner did not seem to care about agreement. It cared about shifts. It cared about counters being worked, signs being turned off, bells being rung, eyes being closed. Marlene had not simply trained me. She had passed the counter to me because something had to stand between the thing under the floor and the road outside. The coffee machine hissed behind me, and I flinched so hard I nearly dropped the rules. For 1 second, I thought the humming had come back. It had not. Not fully. But beneath the ordinary sounds of the diner, beneath the fluorescent buzz and the coffee drip and the soft click of the wall clock, there was a memory of a note. Low, patient, waiting for someone to forget why the rules mattered. I finally understood rule number 8 then. It was not about closing the diner for the morning. It was not about refusing service. It was not even about customers. The open sign was a window. As long as it stayed lit, something under Marrow Creek could use every eye inside the building to search for the highway. At 5:30, when the dark began thinning and the outside world became easier to see, the sign had to go off so the thing below could not follow the light out. Marlene had known that. She had known the humming was not just a sound. It was a way of feeling for openings. It made people look. It made them turn toward voices, toward reflections, toward the road. It borrowed eyes because it had none of its own. And because I had opened one of mine, even for less than a second, it had learned enough to recognize me. That was my price. I was not free. I was marked as someone who had seen the seam and lived. I folded the rule sheet, put it in my apron pocket, and walked to the front door. It unlocked easily now. Too easily. The bell above it did not ring when I opened it. That bothered me more than I expected. Outside, the air smelled like wet gravel and cold fields. I crossed to my car, my hands shaking so badly it took 3 tries to get the key into the ignition. The Chevy started with a tired cough. For a moment, I just sat there watching the diner through the windshield. The open sign was dark. The windows reflected the empty parking lot. Marlene's pickup sat silent near the kitchen entrance. I told myself I would drive straight to town, find the sheriff, tell someone that Marlene was missing. Then my eyes moved to the rearview mirror. Booth 7 was visible through the diner window in the reflection. I had parked at the wrong angle to see it directly, but the mirror showed it clearly. The booth was occupied. Not by the man in the raincoat. Not by Marlene. By me. A version of me sat facing the window with both hands wrapped around a white coffee cup. The handle pointed toward the wall. I looked forward so fast my neck hurt. Through the windshield, booth 7 was empty. In the mirror, I was still there, watching myself drive away. I did not go to the sheriff. I drove home with every mirror turned toward the ceiling and the radio off, because static had started forming around the edges of every station. By Monday, an envelope arrived under my apartment door. Inside was a clean copy of the house rules, my name printed at the bottom beneath Marlene's. There was also a key to the diner and a schedule card with one shift listed. Midnight to 6. Every night until someone else is trained. I tried not to go back. I lasted 2 nights. On the 3rd, the humming started under my apartment floor, very soft, just beneath the kitchen tile in my bedroom. Window filled with red light from a neon sign that was not there. So I went back. I keep the rules now. I hire the next desperate server when the diner tells me who is coming. I explain the coffee cups, the freezer, the bell, the open sign. Most of them think I am strange. Some laugh. I do not blame them. I laughed too at first. I used to think the rules were written to protect us from whatever waited under the diner. But when I saw my name appear at the bottom of the page, I understood the truth. They were written to make sure that thing did not find the road. So if you ever stop at a roadside diner after midnight and the server tells you not to greet the customers, not to ask where they are headed, and to close your eyes when the humming starts, do not argue. Do not peek. Do not count any sound except the bell above the door. And if the open sign goes dark while you are still inside, stay seated, keep your eyes closed, and pray the person behind the counter remembers every rule.